The moment Bryce Wellington heard his 4-year-old daughter crying through the community pool's locked equipment room door, he knew the Willowstone Estates HOA had finally crossed a line that would cost them everything. What started as a dispute over pool hours would end with federal agents, hidden recordings of extortion, and the complete unraveling of a corrupt HOA empire that had terrorized residents for years. But nobody at that sweltering July afternoon pool party could have imagined that the HOA president's meltdown would expose crimes far worse than anyone suspected. Bryce Wellington had lived in Willowstone Estates for exactly 13 months, and he'd received exactly 13 HOA violations, one for each month. Like clockwork. The latest citation, delivered that morning, claimed his American flag was displayed at a non-regulation angle and demanded a $75 fine. As a software engineer who worked from home, Bryce had specifically chosen this gated community in suburban Atlanta for its amenities: the Olympic-sized pool, tennis courts, walking trails, and supposedly family-friendly atmosphere. The brochures had promised resort-style living and a community that cares. What they hadn't mentioned was that the HOA president, Cordelia Ashford, ran the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. It was 2:15 p.m. on a brutally hot Tuesday when Bryce arrived at the community pool with his daughter Madison and son Tyler. The temperature had hit 97 degrees, and the pool was the only relief from the oppressive Georgia humidity. Several families were already there, spread across the deck chairs and shallow end. "Daddy, can I get my floaties from the equipment room?" Madison asked, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she pointed to the small building adjacent to the pool house. "Sure, sweetheart." Bryce had stored their pool toys there just yesterday, in the designated resident storage area, but when he tried the door, it was locked. Not just locked, there was a new electronic keypad where the regular lock used to be. "Excuse me." Bryce called to the teenage lifeguard. "When did they change the lock on the equipment room?" The lifeguard, whose name tag read Jake, looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Ashford had it changed this morning," she said. "Only board members have the code now." Bryce felt his jaw tighten. This was exactly the kind of petty power play Cordelia specialized in, but residents have always had access to store their pool equipment. "I know, Mr. Wellington." But Jake was cut off by a familiar voice that made every parent at the pool tense up. "Is there a problem here?" Cordelia Ashford stood at the pool gate like a general surveying a battlefield. At 53 years old, she maintained herself with the fierce determination of someone who viewed aging as a personal insult. Her bottle blonde hair was styled in what Bryce privately called her Karen helmet, and her white tennis outfit was pristine despite the heat. She wore oversized sunglasses that she probably thought made her look like Jackie O, but actually made her look like a predatory insect. "Yes, there's a problem," Bryce said, keeping his voice level. "You've locked residents out of the equipment room where we store our children's pool toys." Cordelia's lips curved into what might charitably be called a smile. "Oh, Bryce, you're still having trouble following community guidelines. I see. The board voted last night to restrict equipment room access. Too many non-residents were using our facilities." "What non-residents? Everyone here lives in Willowstone. That's what we're determining." She pulled out her phone and began taking photos of the families around the pool. Several parents instinctively pulled their children closer. "I need to verify that everyone here is a resident in good standing. Those with outstanding violations or fees don't have pool privileges." A murmur of anger rippled through the gathered families. Bryce noticed she was particularly focused on photographing the Patels, the Gonzalez family, and the Washington Saul families of color who had moved in within the last year. "Cordelia, you can't just, it's Mrs. Ashford, and I most certainly can. As HOA president, I have a fiduciary duty to protect community resources." She spotted something that made her eyes narrow behind her sunglasses. "Speaking of which, Mr. Shen, is that a glass container? You know glass is prohibited in the pool area?" David Chen, a pediatrician who lived 3 houses down from Bryce, looked at his plastic water bottle in confusion. "This is plastic? It looks like glass to me. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Are you serious right now?" David's wife Lisa stood up, her voice rising. "You've been harassing us since we moved in. Last week you tried to fine us because our recycling bin was visible from the street for 20 minutes. Selective enforcement is illegal," Bryce said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. He'd been researching HOA law extensively since his 7th violation. Targeting specific residents while ignoring the same violations by others is discrimination? Cordelia's face flushed beneath her makeup. "How dare you accuse me of discrimination? I enforce the rules equally." "Really?" Bryce pulled out his phone. Because I have photos from last week's board meeting at your house. Your recycling bin was visible from the street the entire day. Should I file a complaint? The HOA president's composure cracked slightly. That's different. I was hosting HOA business. The rules don't mention exceptions for HOA business. Daddy, I really need to use the bathroom. Madison tugged at Bryce's shorts. Just a minute. Sweetheart. The pool house bathrooms are for board members only, Cordelia announced. Community members need to use their home facilities. You've got to be kidding me. Lisa Chen said. The pool house bathrooms have always been public. New policy. Effective immediately. Cordelia was typing furiously on her phone. I'm documenting everyone here who's being disruptive. You'll all be receiving violation notices. That's when Madison started doing the telltale dance of a 4-year-old who really needed a bathroom. Bryce made a quick decision. Come on, baby. We'll use the bathroom and then come right back. He scooped up Madison and headed for the pool house. Cordelia stepped in front of the door. I said those facilities are restricted. My 4-year-old daughter needs to use the bathroom. Move. Are you threatening me? Cordelia's voice rose to a pitch that could shatter glass. I feel threatened. This is assault. Nobody's touching you. Cordelia, just let my daughter use the bathroom. Madison was squirming now. Tears starting to form. Daddy, I really have to go. I'm calling security, Cordelia shrieked. This man is attacking me. Bryce stepped around her and pushed open the pool house door. The bathroom was right there, just 10 feet away. He set Madison down and she ran inside. Cordelia followed them, still screaming about assault and trespassing. You're in violation of HOA bylaws, section 50. 3. 2, she shouted. Unauthorized use of restricted facilities. That's a $500 fine. Send me the bill. Bryce said flatly. Add it to the 13 other bogus fines you've sent me. Bogus? Bogus? Cordelia's voice had reached a pitch that made dogs 3 blocks away start barking. Your grass was a 1/4 inch too tall. Your mailbox numbers were in Helvetica instead of Times New Roman. Your garage door was open for 32 minutes instead of the allowed 30. Other parents had gathered at the pool house entrance, filming the confrontation on their phones. Bryce noticed Jake the lifeguard was also recording. Looking deeply uncomfortable but determined. Mrs. Ashford, Lisa Chen said. Her phone held steady. Are you seriously screaming at a man for letting his 4-year-old use the bathroom? Stay out of this, Cordelia whirled on her. You people think you can just move in here and change everything. This used to be a nice community. The racist undertones weren't even undertones anymore. They were overtones. Clear and ugly in the afternoon sun. You people? David Chen stepped forward. What exactly do you mean by that? You know exactly what I mean. People who don't respect the standards of this community. People who bring down property values. People who... She was cut off by the sound of a toilet flushing. Madison emerged from the bathroom, looking confused by all the adults crowding around. All done. Daddy. Good job. Sweetheart. Bryce washed her hands quickly at the sink, trying to ignore Cordelia's continued ranting about violations and fines and the decay of community standards. As they exited the pool house, Cordelia made a critical mistake. She grabbed Madison's pool bag from Bryce's shoulder. This is being confiscated as evidence of your trespassing. Let go of my daughter's bag. It's evidence. Madison started crying as Cordelia yanked her favorite Moana pool bag away. That's when Bryce noticed something that made his blood run cold. Cordelia had opened the equipment room door, the one she'd claimed only board members could access, and was shoving Madison's bag inside. Wait, Bryce said. If you're putting her bag in there, then open it back up so we can get our other things. Absolutely not. Everything in this room is being held, pending review of your violations. Cordelia slammed the door shut and began entering a new code. That's when they heard it. A small voice from inside the equipment room. Hello? Is someone there? I'm scared. Every parent at the pool froze. Bryce's heart dropped to his stomach. Is there a child in there? Mommy? A little boy's voice. Muffled but clearly terrified. Mommy? The door won't open. Oh my God. That's Aiden. Sarah Patel rushed forward. My son is in that room. He must have gone in when it was open earlier. Open the door, Bryce demanded. Open it right now. Cordelia clutched the keypad, looking suddenly uncertain. I told it. He shouldn't have been in there. Open the goddamn door, Sarah screamed. I don't. The code isn't working. Cordelia was fumbling with the keypad. Her fingers shaking. You locked a child in there? David Chen already had his phone out. I'm calling 911. No, Cordelia shrieked. No police, I'm handling it. But she wasn't handling it. She kept entering wrong codes. The keypad beeping angrily with each attempt. Inside? 5-year-old Aiden Patel was crying harder now. calling for his mother. Move. Bryce shoved Cordelia aside and examined the door. It was solid steel, designed to protect expensive pool equipment. The electronic lock was high-end, probably installed that morning. "Jake," he called to the lifeguard. "Is there another way into this room?" "No, sir. Just that door." "Mrs. Ashford said it was for security." "Mommy." "It's dark." Aiden's voice was pure panic now. "I can't breathe good. We're coming." "Baby," Sarah was crying, pressing against the door. "Just stay calm. The fire department is on the way," David announced. "They said don't try to break down the door. It might hurt him." Cordelia had backed away from the group, her face pale beneath her makeup. "This isn't my fault. He shouldn't have been in there. This is trespassing." "He was trespassing. You locked a 5-year-old in a storage room." Lisa Chen's voice was deadly. "In 97-degree heat. That room has no ventilation. I didn't know he was in there." "Because you didn't check before you changed the locks and locked everyone out?" Bryce pulled out his own phone. Switching to voice recorder. "Cordelia. What's the code? Tell us the code." I don't remember exactly." "You don't remember?" Sarah lunged at her, held back only by her husband Raj. "My baby is locked in there and you don't remember?" The sound of sirens grew closer, not just fire trucks, police cars too. Someone had called about more than just a locked door. "Aiden. Sweetheart. Help is coming," Sarah called through the door. "Can you hear the sirens? The firefighters are coming." But Aiden had gone quiet. Too quiet. "Aiden," Sarah's voice cracked. "Baby. Answer mommy." A faint whimper came through the door. Then nothing. "He's passing out from the heat," David said grimly. "That metal room is like an oven. We need to get him out now." Bryce made a decision. "Everyone back up." He'd noticed a maintenance panel on the side of the building. If the room shared ventilation with the pool house, he grabbed a pool skimmer and used the metal end to pry open the panel. Inside was an air conditioning duct, just big enough for someone small to crawl through. "Tyler," he called to his 10-year-old son. "Come here. Buddy. I need your help." As Bryce explained what he needed, Tyler to crawl through the duct and unlock the door from inside the first fire truck, screamed into the parking lot, but they might be too late. Every second in that superheated metal box was dangerous for a small child. "I can do it, Dad," Tyler said bravely. "Mrs. Ashford, you're under arrest." Everyone turned. 2 police officers had arrived with the firefighters, and one was holding handcuffs. "What? Why?" Cordelia shrieked. "Child endangerment? Reckless endangerment. And about 6 other charges I'm sure the DA will add." The officer, whose badge read Martinez, looked disgusted. "Ma'am, you locked a child in an unventilated storage room in extreme heat. That's attempted murder in some jurisdictions." "I didn't know," Cordelia wailed, as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "It's not my fault. These people don't follow the rules. They're destroying our community. They're—" She was still ranting as the firefighters used a crowbar to force open the equipment room door. Sarah Patel rushed inside and emerged carrying a limp, unconscious Aiden. The paramedics immediately went to work, placing him on a stretcher and beginning emergency cooling protocols. "He's breathing," one paramedic announced, "but he's severely overheated. We need to transport immediately." As the ambulance prepared to leave, Bryce noticed something that made his anger burn even hotter. Inside the equipment room, visible now that the door was open, were dozens of confiscated items: pool toys, sports equipment, American flags, even what looked like someone's military medals, all tagged with violation notices. But that wasn't the worst part. In the corner was a laptop, still open, showing a spreadsheet. The screen was visible from where Bryce stood, and what he saw made him pull out his phone and start recording. The spreadsheet had columns labeled target, ethnicity, violation to use, fine amount, and ultimate goal. The Chens were listed with Asian and force out property value concern. The Patels, Indian and excessive fines until foreclosure. The Washingtons, black and create hostile environment, voluntary departure. His own name was there too. Wellington, white, liberal, and married to Hispanic woman. Neutralize influence. "Holy shit," Jake the lifeguard whispered, looking over Bryce's shoulder. "She had a whole plan to force out minority families." "Not just minorities," Bryce said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Anyone who didn't fit her vision of what the community should be." Officer Martinez had noticed the laptop too. "Nobody touch anything. This is now a crime scene." She spoke into her radio. "We're going to need a detective unit, and probably someone from the Fair Housing Department. We've got evidence of systematic discrimination and organized harassment." "Cordelia, sitting in the back of the patrol car, seemed to realize what they'd found. She began screaming again, her words muffled by the closed windows but her panic evident. "There's more," an older woman said quietly. Bryce recognized her as Eleanor Patterson, who'd lived in Willowstone for 30 years. That laptop has records going back a decade. Cordelia and her cronies have driven out dozens of families, always legal residents. Always people of color or those married to people of color. She'd coordinate violations, stage complaints, even sabotage property to create violations. "How do you know this?" Officer Martinez asked. Eleanor's weathered face was grim. "Because I was her secretary for 5 years. I quit when I couldn't stomach it anymore. But I kept copies of everything, hoping someday." She pulled a USB drive from her pocket. Every email, every plan, every falsified complaint. 10 years of evidence. The crowd around the pool had grown as news spread through the neighborhood. Families who'd been targeted by Cordelia's reign of terror began sharing their stories. The Jacksons, who'd been fined $3,000 for having ethnic cooking smells. The Nguyen's, whose home had been vandalized repeatedly until they moved. The Hernandez family, who'd received so many violations they'd had to declare bankruptcy. She would recruit certain neighbors. Someone said, promise them positions on the board or reduced fees if they'd file complaints against targeted families. She had my car towed from my own driveway. Another added, said it was an unsightly vehicle because it was a Honda instead of a luxury car. As more stories emerged, Bryce felt his phone buzz. It was a text from an unknown number. "Stop talking, or your wife's immigration status becomes an issue." His blood ran cold. His wife Elena was a naturalized citizen, had been for years. But the threat was clear. Cordelia still had allies, and they were watching. That's when he made a decision that would change everything. He forwarded the threatening text to Officer Martinez, then climbed onto one of the pool chairs. "Listen up. Everyone," he called out. "I just received a threat trying to silence me. They're threatening my wife's immigration status. She's been a citizen for 8 years. By the way, but this shows they're still active. Still trying to intimidate us." He held up his phone. "I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting bully run our community. Who else has received threats? Who else has evidence of discrimination or harassment?" Hands went up across the crowd. Dozens of them. "There's something else," Eleanor Patterson said, her voice stronger now. "Cordelia wasn't just targeting residents. She's been embezzling from the HOA funds. That new keypad system, installed by her nephew's company at 5 times the normal rate. The landscaping contract, her brother-in-law, charging triple. I have the real invoices and the falsified ones she presented to the board." The sound of more sirens filled the air. Not just local police, now Bryce could see FBI and IRS badges as more investigators arrived. Someone had called in the federal authorities. As investigators began interviewing residents and collecting evidence, the pool area transformed into something like a crime scene, crossed with a support group. Families who'd suffered in silence for years finally had a voice. The teenagers live-streamed everything, ensuring transparency and preventing any cover-up. But the day's drama wasn't over. As crime scene technicians processed the equipment room, one of them emerged with a sealed envelope marked, "Insurance policy open only if arrested." Officer Martinez, now wearing gloves, carefully opened it. Her face went pale as she read. "We're going to need the district attorney here." "Now, what is it?" Bryce asked. Martinez looked around at the crowd, seeming to weigh her options. Then she made a decision. "According to this, Cordelia Ashford has been blackmailing several prominent city officials to protect her operation. She has photos, financial records." She paused. "This goes way beyond HOA violations. We're looking at a criminal conspiracy involving multiple levels of government." The crowd erupted. Someone had connected a phone to the pool's PA system, and suddenly a recording began to play. It was Cordelia's voice, from what sounded like a board meeting. "Don't care if the Washingtons have lived here for 3 years. They're bringing down property values just by existing. I want them gone by Christmas. Use the lawn height violations, the parking complaints, whatever it takes. And if that doesn't work, well, sometimes accidents happen to mailboxes and car windows." The recording cut to another conversation. "The FBI, please. Deputy Chief Morrison is my cousin. One phone call, and any investigation disappears. We've done it before. Remember the fair housing complaint from 2018? Vanished like magic? The price was just a few thousand in cash, and some compromising photos from our security cameras." Another voice. Male this time. "Cordelia, this is getting out of hand. The Patels are good people." "Good people?" Cordelia's laugh was cold. "They're dots. Not feathers. Richard. Wrong kind of Indian for this neighborhood. Either you're with us or you're against us. And if you're against us, well, I wonder what your wife would think about your Thursday afternoon golf games with that young cart girl. The recording continued, each revelation more damning than the last. Bribery, blackmail, conspiracy, fraud. It was all there in Cordelia's own voice. Someone had been secretly recording board meetings for months, maybe years. That's my dad. Everyone turned to see Jake the lifeguard, tears streaming down his face. That man's voice, Richard, that's my dad. He killed himself 2 years ago. Left a note about being blackmailed, but we never knew. His voice broke. She drove him to suicide. The crowd's anger, already at a boiling point, threatened to spill over. But Bryce climbed back onto the chair. Stop. This is what she wants, Cass. Violence. Something to make us look like the bad guys. We're better than that. We have evidence. We have the law on our side. Let's do this right. As if on cue. A black SUV pulled up and a woman in a sharp suit stepped out. I'm Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Thornton. I understand we have a situation here involving civil rights violations, embezzlement, and potential RICO charges. RICO, someone asked. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Ada Thornton explained. Originally for the mob, but it applies to any organized criminal conspiracy, and from what I'm hearing, that's exactly what we have here. As investigators continued gathering evidence and taking statements, the pool area had become command central for what was shaping up to be one of the largest HOA fraud cases in Georgia history. News vans arrived, their satellites reaching toward the sky like metal prayers. But in the middle of all this chaos, a small voice brought everyone back to what mattered. Mommy? Aiden Patel's voice came through on Sarah's phone. She'd been video calling the hospital constantly. The little boy was awake, drinking juice. Surrounded by teddy bears the nurses had found for him. Hi, baby. Sarah sobbed with relief. How are you feeling? Tired. And hot. But the nice doctor gave me a popsicle. He paused. Mommy, why did the mean lady lock me in the dark room? The question hung in the air. Simple and devastating. Why indeed? Bryce looked around at his neighborhood community that had been divided and conquered for so long. Now united in their demand for justice. Cordelia Ashford sat in the back of a police car, her kingdom crumbling around her. But her arrest was just the beginning. The real revolution was just getting started. In the distance, more sirens wailed, and someone whispered what everyone was thinking. This is going to change everything. The pool's PA system crackled to life once more, and another recording began to play. This time, it was Cordelia's voice on a phone call, dated just last week. Yes, Judge Morrison. It's your cousin Cordelia. I need you to dismiss the Chen family's small claims case. They're trying to fight their fines. What do you mean you can't? Don't forget, I have those photos from the Christmas party. Your wife still doesn't know about Tampa. Does she? That's what I thought. Make it go away. Or everyone finds out about your little problem with... The recording cut off abruptly as federal agents rushed to secure the PA system, but the damage was done. A judge was involved. This conspiracy reached into the courthouse itself. As the sun began to set over Willowstone Estates, painting the sky the color of justice deferred, but not denied. One thing was crystal clear. Cordelia Ashford hadn't just broken HOA rules. She'd broken federal law, state law, and the sacred trust of a community. The full weight of her crimes would come crashing down like a tsunami of consequences that had been building for over a decade. But for now, as parents hugged their children a little tighter, and neighbors who'd been turned against each other began to reconcile, there was a sense that finally the storm was breaking. The only question was, who else would it take down with it? The next morning, Willowstone Estates looked like a scene from a crime thriller. FBI mobile command units lined the main street, their antennas and satellite dishes, creating a mechanical forest against the Georgian sunrise. News helicopters circled overhead like vultures sensing a feast. But the real storm was about to break inside the community clubhouse, where an emergency meeting had been called. Bryce Wellington arrived at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the meeting was set to begin. The parking lot was already packed, with residents spilling out onto the grass. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night coordinating with lawyers and fellow residents through a hastily created group chat that now had over 300 members. Bryce, David Chen waved him over. Did you see the morning news? 3 more arrests overnight? They got Judge Morrison at his house. His wife threw a vase at the FBI agents. Good, Bryce said grimly. Any word on Aiden? Sarah texted an hour ago. He's being released this afternoon. Full recovery expected. Thank God. Inside the clubhouse, folding chairs had been arranged in rows facing a makeshift stage. The usual HOA board table sat empty. 4 of the 5 board members were currently in federal custody. Only Treasurer Harold Finch remained. And he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Ladies and gentlemen, Harold's voice shook as he spoke into the microphone. I want to begin by saying I had no knowledge of President Ashford's activities. I reviewed the financial records last night with federal investigators, and I'm as shocked as you are. Bullshit, someone yelled from the back. You signed off on those inflated contracts? I was told they were competitive bids. She had documentation. That she forged? Another voice. We want a full forensic audit. The crowd was getting restless. Bryce stood up and walked to the microphone. Harold, looking relieved, stepped aside. Everyone, please, Bryce said. We're all angry. We have every right to be. But right now, we need to focus on moving forward. The FBI has asked me to share some information with you all. He pulled out his phone and connected it to the clubhouse projector. The screen lit up with a photograph that made several people gasp. It showed Cordelia Ashford at what appeared to be a dinner party, surrounded by men in expensive suits. A banner in the background read, White Willowstone Initiative members only. This photo was found on Cordelia's personal computer. Bryce explained, the White Willowstone Initiative was a secret organization dedicated to, and I'm quoting from their charter here, maintaining the demographic purity of select neighborhoods through coordinated economic pressure. The room erupted. Shouts of anger, disgust, and disbelief filled the air. There's more, Bryce continued, clicking to the next slide. This is a map showing their target neighborhoods across 6 states. Willowstone was their pilot program. If successful here, they plan to expand nationwide. The map showed red dots across Georgia, Florida, Texas, Arizona, North Carolina, and Virginia. Each dot represented a community targeted for what the documents called demographic adjustment. The FBI estimates that over the past decade, this organization has forced out more than 200 families through coordinated harassment, fraudulent fees, and strategic property devaluation. Bryce said, the total economic damage is in the millions. Eleanor Patterson stood up. I want to add something. Last night, I gave investigators everything I had, but I held one thing back to share with all of you first. She pulled out a tablet and handed it to Bryce. Security footage from Cordelia's home office. 3 weeks ago, Bryce connected the tablet and hit play. The footage showed Cordelia on a phone call, but this time the audio was crystal clear. No, Senator, I don't think you understand. Either you kill the fair housing investigation, or your constituents see those photos from the governor's mansion. Yes, the ones with the teenage exactly. I thought that would clarify things. The Willowstone situation is under control. These people will learn their place or they'll leave. It's that simple. The room went dead silent. A United States senator was being blackmailed. His name is being withheld pending investigation, Bryce said, but the FBI confirmed he's cooperating fully. Apparently, Cordelia had compromising material on dozens of officials at local, place, state, and federal levels. The clubhouse doors burst open. Ada, Rebecca Thornton, entered, flanked by federal agents. Mr. Wellington, I apologize for interrupting, but there's been a development. We need to evacuate the clubhouse immediately. What? Why? We've received a credible threat. Someone claiming to represent the White Willowstone Initiative says there are explosive devices in 3 community buildings. Panic rippled through the crowd. But Thornton raised her hand. Remain calm. We have bomb squads en route. Please exit in an orderly fashion and gather in the parking lot across the street. As residents filed out, Bryce noticed something odd. A man in a maintenance uniform was walking quickly away from the building, heading toward a van. Something about his purposeful stride seemed wrong. That guy. Bryce pointed him out to Agent Martinez, who'd been at the pool yesterday. He's not one of our regular maintenance staff. Martinez spoke into her radio. Within seconds, agents converged on the van. The man tried to run but was tackled within 10 yards. As they searched him, an agent held up what looked like a remote control. Detonator, someone yelled. Bomb squad. Now. The next hour was a blur of evacuations, robot déploiement, and controlled detonations. 3 devices were found in the clubhouse basement. One in the pool equipment room where Aiden had been trapped, and one in the HOA records storage facility. They were real, professional, and deadly. The maintenance man turned out to be Marcus Ashford, Cordelia's nephew, the one who'd installed the overpriced security systems. He broke within minutes of interrogation. spilling everything about the White Willowstone Initiative's plan to destroy evidence and silence witnesses. By noon, the Attorney General herself had arrived. A press conference was hastily assembled in the Willowstone parking lot, with residents standing behind a podium forest of microphones. What we've uncovered here, Attorney General Patricia Hayes announced, is one of the largest organized discrimination conspiracies in modern American history. The White Willowstone Initiative had chapters in 6 states, assets in the tens of millions, and a coordinated plan to economically, ethnically cleanse entire neighborhoods. She paused, letting that sink in. As of this morning, we have 47 individuals in custody, with more arrests expected. We've frozen over $30 million in assets and identified over 300 victim families. This is just the beginning. A reporter raised her hand. Can you confirm Senator Blackwood's involvement? The Attorney General's face was stone. I can confirm that multiple elected officials at various levels of government are under investigation. No one is above the law. As the press conference continued, Bryce felt his phone buzz. Unknown number again. His finger hesitated over the delete button. Then he opened it. Your wife is at 1547 Maple Drive. Come alone or she dies. His blood turned to ice. Elena was supposed to be at work. He tried calling her straight to voicemail. Heart pounding. He slipped away from the crowd and ran to his car. 1547 Maple Drive was in the older section of Willowstone, where several houses sat empty, pending renovation. He should call the police. He knew that, but the image of Elena in danger overrode all rational thought. He drove to Maple Drive, his hands shaking on the wheel. The house at 1547 was a colonial that had been empty for months. Its windows dark and foreboding. The front door was ajar. Bryce pushed it open, stepping into musty darkness. Elena? In here? Her voice, scared but alive, came from the back of the house. Bryce rushed toward it, bursting into what used to be a kitchen. Elena sat tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth, eyes wide with fear. Standing behind her was Richard Pemberton, former HOA vice president who'd supposedly been in Cordelia's pocket. He held a gun, but his hand was shaking. Richard? Bryce raised his hand slowly. What are you doing? What I have to do? Richard's eyes were wild. Disperate. They have my son. The initiative they took Tommy this morning. Said if I don't eliminate the witnesses, they'll... Richard, listen to me. The FBI has the initiative. It's over. Whoever told you they have Tommy is lying. No, they sent proof. Richard pulled out his phone with his free hand, showing a photo of a teenage boy tied up in what looked like a warehouse. They said you and Elena are the primary witnesses. If I remove you, they'll let him go. Bryce's mind raced. Something was off. Richard, when was that photo taken? This morning. Look at the timestamp, and look at Tommy's shirt. Richard glanced at the phone, confusion crossing his face. The timestamp showed yesterday's date, and the shirt was the same one Tommy had worn in his school photo last year. A photo that had been in the HOA newsletter. It's photoshopped. Richard, someone's manipulating you. Think about it. The real initiative leaders are all in custody. Someone else is using you. The gun wavered. But who would? A slow clap echoed from the hallway. A figure stepped into view, and Bryce's jaw dropped. It was Harold Finch, the meek treasurer, who'd claimed ignorance at the morning meeting. Bravo, Bryce. You always were too smart for your own good. Harold's entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the nervous accountant. In his place stood someone cold, calculating, and completely in control. Harold? Richard turned, confused. What are you doing here? Cleaning up Cordelia's mess? As usual, Harold pulled out his own gun, equipped with a silencer. She was always too emotional, too obvious. The initiative was my idea, my design. She was just the loud, racist face that drew all the attention. You're the real leader, Bryce said, pieces falling into place. Cordelia was your puppet, a useful one, until she wasn't. Harold kept his gun trained on Richard. Drop the weapon. Richard, your son is safe at school. I needed someone desperate enough to do the dirty work. And your gambling debts made you perfect. Richard's gun clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees, sobbing. I just wanted to protect my son. Pathetic. Harold turned to Bryce. You know, I actually admired your tenacity. In another life, you might have been initiative material, but you chose the wrong side. I chose the only side, the one that doesn't terrorize families for being the wrong color. Harold laughed. Color? You think this was about race? That was Cordelia's obsession? Not mine. This was about money, property values, portfolio optimization. I played into her prejudices because it made her easier to control, but I would have targeted anyone who threatened my investments. You destroyed lives for property values? I protected investments worth hundreds of millions. The initiative's members have portfolios that depend on maintaining certain demographics. It's not personal. It's mathematics. Mathematics? Elena's muffled voice was furious behind the duct tape. The average property value in a neighborhood drops by 15 to 20% with certain demographic shifts. That's not racism. That's data. I just monetized it. Bryce felt sick. Somehow, this cold financial calculation was worse than Cordelia's naked bigotry. At least she believed in something. However twisted, Harold believed in nothing but numbers. The FBI knows everything. Bryce said, your encrypted files? Your offshore accounts. They know what I wanted them to know. Cordelia's sloppy operation. Her racist rants. Blackmail schemes. All of it leads back to her. Not me. I'm just the treasurer who got duped by a charismatic leader. Harold smiled coldly. After I eliminate the 3 witnesses who could contradict that narrative, I'll be the victim who helps the FBI unravel her crimes. Maybe even get a book deal. 3 witnesses? You, your lovely wife, and Eleanor Patterson. She's currently having car trouble on a very dangerous curve on Highway 19. Brake lines are so unreliable these days. You son of a... Bryce lunged forward. But Harold fired. The bullet whizzed past Bryce's ear, shattering a window behind him. The next one won't miss. Now, here's what's going to happen. A murder-suicide. Poor Richard, driven mad by guilt over his involvement with Cordelia, kills the couple who exposed the conspiracy, then himself. Tragic. But it ties up so many loose ends. But Harold had made a crucial mistake. In his arrogance, he'd failed to notice that Elena had been working at the duct tape while he monologued. Her hands came free just as he turned to shoot Richard. No! Elena launched herself at Harold, knocking his aim off. The shot went wide, and Richard scrambled for his dropped gun. Bryce tackled Harold, wrestling for the weapon. They crashed into the counter, sending up clouds of dust. The gun skittered across the floor. Harold was stronger than he looked, fighting with the desperation of a man who saw his empire crumbling. A shot rang out. Then silence. Harold slumped to the floor, clutching his shoulder. Richard stood trembling, his gun smoking. I shot him. Oh God. I shot someone. You saved our lives. Elena said, pulling the last of the duct tape off. Bryce. Call 911. Now. But Bryce was already dialing, and he could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had heard the shots. Within minutes, the house was swarming with law enforcement. Harold was taken away on a stretcher, screaming about his rights and his lawyers. Agent Martinez arrived, looking grim. We found Eleanor Patterson. Someone had definitely tampered with her car. But she noticed and called us instead of driving. She's safe. She looked at Harold being loaded into the ambulance. I can't believe it was him all along. He played everyone, Bryce said, exhausted. Made Cordelia the face of the operation while he pulled the strings. How many more Harolds are out there? How many more shadow puppeteers? That's what we're going to find out, Martinez said. The real investigation starts now. The next weeks were a blur of grand jury testimonies, federal investigations, and media coverage that made Willowstone Estates a household name for all the wrong reasons. The HOA was dissolved by court order. Property values, ironically, skyrocketed. As investors saw opportunity in the notorious neighborhood, Cordelia Ashford was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison for racketeering, conspiracy, fraud, and civil rights violations. Her breakdown during sentencing, where she screamed about demographic replacement and white genocide, went viral and became a cautionary tale about the dangers of extremism. Harold Finch got life without parole. The investigation revealed he'd been running similar schemes in 12 states, always hiding behind figureheads like Cordelia. His network had generated over $100 million in profits through systematically terrorizing minority families. He never showed remorse, maintaining to the end that he was just a smart businessman. Richard Pemberton cooperated fully and received 5 years probation. He became an advocate against HOA abuse, traveling to speak about how desperation and fear could make good people do terrible things. Jake the lifeguard discovered his father had been trying to expose the conspiracy before his death. A hidden USB drive contained evidence that helped convict dozens more initiative members. A scholarship was created in his father's name for young people standing up against discrimination. Little Aiden Patel made a full recovery and became something of a local hero. His story, the 5-year-old locked in a hot equipment room for the crime of existing, while Indian became a rallying cry for HOA reform nationwide. 6 months later, Willowstone Estates held its first truly democratic election. The new board was diverse, transparent, and committed to serving all residents equally. Bryce was elected president by a landslide, running on a platform of never again. His first act was to remove all the locks from the equipment room and install a simple sign: "This space belongs to everyone." On a warm spring evening, the community held a celebration by the pool. Families of all backgrounds mingled freely. Children played without fear, and the only rules enforced were basic safety and courtesy. Eleanor Patterson, now in her 70s, stood by the pool gate where it had all exploded that July day. "You know," she told Bryce, "I've lived here for 30 years. This is the first time it's actually felt like home." Sarah Patel nearby, watching Aiden splash in the shallow end. "My son asked me why that lady locked him in the room. I told him, some people are afraid of differences. He said that was silly. Differences make things interesting. Like Lego colors. Kids get it. Why can't adults?" As the sun set over Willowstone Estates, Bryce looked around at his neighbors: black, white, brown, Asian, Latino, mixed, all simply being human together. The pool that had been a battleground was now just a pool. The community that had been divided was now united. But he knew the fight wasn't over. The White Willowstone Initiative had been destroyed, but the attitudes that created it remained in too many hearts. The work of building truly inclusive communities would take generations. Still, as he watched Madison play with Aiden and a dozen other children, all oblivious to the racial categories that had almost torn their world apart, he felt hope. Change was possible. It just took courage to stop those who would divided people for profit or prejudice. "Daddy," Madison called, "watch me swim." And Bryce watched, thinking about the world she would inherit. It would be better than the one he'd grown up in. He and his neighbors would make sure of it. The revolution that began with a locked door and a child's tears had become something larger, a movement that spread across the nation, reforming HOAs, strengthening civil rights enforcement, and reminding America that community meant everyone. In the end, Cordelia Ashford and Harold Finch had failed in their mission to create a pure community. Instead, they'd created something far more powerful, a truly united one. And that unity, forged in the fire of injustice and tempered by courage, would prove unbreakable. The pool at Willowstone Estates was finally what it had always claimed to be: place where every family could find their sanctuary. The annual Willowstone Unity Festival was in full swing. Where once HOA meetings had been weapons of exclusion, the community now celebrated its diversity with food trucks offering cuisine from around the world, children's faces painted in rainbow colors, and a massive banner reading, "Every family belongs here," stretched across the pool entrance. Bryce stood at the dedication ceremony for the Richard Pemberton Memorial Garden, watching as Jake unveiled a plaque that read, "In memory of those silenced by hate, and in honor of those who find the courage to speak truth." "My dad wasn't perfect," Jake said into the microphone, his voice steady now, after months of therapy. "But he tried to do the right thing in the end." That's what this garden represents: second chances, redemption, and the power of standing up to bullies, even when you're scared. The crowd applauded, and Bryce noticed federal investigators mingling with residents. The Willowstone case had sparked a nationwide audit of HOA practices. Already, 17 similar conspiracies had been uncovered across the country, their perpetrators brought to justice. Ada Rebecca Thornton, now promoted to district attorney, took the stage. The Department of Justice has announced the creation of the Fair Housing Enforcement Task Force. Inspired by what happened here, no longer will HOAs be allowed to operate as shadow governments, terrorizing families with impunity. But the real victory was smaller, more personal. Bryce watched as Mrs. Chen taught Aiden Patel to make dumplings at the cultural food booth, while Sarah Patel showed the Chen twins how to wrap samosas. The Washingtons were teaching line dancing to anyone who wanted to learn, their laughter infectious. Elena was organizing a neighborhood watch program, a real one, focused on protecting all residents, not targeting them. "Mr. Wellington?" a young woman approached, notebook in hand. "I'm Jessica Morrison from the Atlanta Constitution. I'm writing a book about the Willowstone conspiracy. Could I ask you one question?" Bryce nodded. "What would you say to other communities facing similar discrimination?" He thought for a moment, watching Madison play with her friendsa, Beautiful mosaic of humanity splashing in the pool where hatred had once reigned. Document everything. Stand together. Never let them make you feel like you don't belong. And remember, bullies like Cordelia and Harold rely on silence and isolation. The moment you speak up, the moment you unite with your neighbors, their power begins to crumble. And the hack? Jessica asked, referring to the Homeowners Against Corruption organization that had sprung from the Willowstone resistance. We're in 23 states now. Bryce smiled, providing legal resources, investigating suspicious HOA actions, and lobbying for reform. What happened here lit a fire that's spreading across the country. Communities are taking back control from petty tyrants. As the sun set over the festival, casting golden light over the celebrating families, Officer Martinez, now Detective Martinez, pulled Bryce aside. Thought you should know? She said quietly. Harold Finch was shanked in federal prison yesterday. He's in critical condition. Apparently, even hardened criminals don't like people who terrorize children. Bryce felt no sympathy. What about Cordelia? Placed in solitary for her own protection after she tried to organize a white supremacist group in prison. She'll serve every day of her 35 years. They stood in companionable silence, watching the community that had risen from the ashes of prejudice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles for justice and equality. But tonight, Willowstone Estates was exactly what it should be, home for everyone who chose to make it one. You know what the best revenge is? Martinez asked. Bryce looked at the pool where children of every color played together, at the parents who'd become friends across cultural lines, at the teenagers live streaming, not tragedy but triumph. Living well, he said, together. And they were.